Welcome back to Red Weather Radio. All right, it's good to see everybody. And why don't we go ahead and get started with an odd moment that happened on Fox News recently, where Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House and Republican presidential candidate, got really based really quickly on some of their daytime programming. Yeah, so Beat, why don't you start us off with Newt Gingrich's based moment?
So Newt Gingrich was talking on, it was a section on Fox News. I don't remember exactly what section, but I do recall that there was a lady who has connections to the Obama administration during the administration, that is. And so he starts going on about one of the people funding or pouring a lot of money into these district attorneys who are getting elected and are facilitating and enabling these riots. And that, of course, is George Soros. And as soon as he mentions that
Oh,
name,
yes.
so they can't pull the sort of Andrew Cuomo, what he did in 2016 when a sitting congressman brought up WikiLeaks, that is the Hillary Clinton leaks, and they just cut his feet immediately. And he gave this very, you know, very what's what I'm looking for, unconvincing. Oh no, we lost his feed. We lost his satellite feed. That sort. So he's there in
Right.
person. So she tries to shut him up. She tells him, "Look, we're not going to talk about that." And anytime he tries to dissuade her or tries to make the case why it's relevant, she's no, we're just not going to talk about it. And there's this awkward silence as well, where Newt Gingrich
Right.
himself is kind of surprised that, wait, this is particularly relevant. Why can't we talk about it?
Yeah, so what one thing I don't he wasn't there in person. It was he was video casting from his house or
Oh, was it?
something.
Sorry, I only listened to
Yeah,
the
he
audio
wasn't there in
feed.
person. So they technically they could have cut his feed, but they didn't. I'm not sure why they didn't, but they really didn't want to talk about it. The host, the black woman, I don't know her name, but she just kind of stared blankly at the camera like a deer in headlights. Like, what do I? All right, well, what do I do now? But George Soros, yeah, you're not allowed to talk about him. He is, as the lefty rags would say, he's the right's boogeyman. He doesn't actually exist, guys. You guys are just chasing ghosts or something. But there is legitimate proof. Like, he's dumped millions of dollars to get specific DAs planted into. I don't remember what city. I think Atlanta has one of his DAs,
A
if
good
I'm
many different cities.
correct. Yeah, specifically Atlanta came to mind because uh, when the riots broke out there over whatever that one guy's name was, I don't remember. The Wendy's guy, I think.
I can't remember which
The
one that
DA
is.
was cutting people loose after they did things that were clearly punishable offenses. So that's the only one I don't even remember the name, but yeah, George Soros is he's kind of like Voldemort in a lot of ways. If you're familiar with Harry Potter, you weren't allowed to say Voldemort's name. I actually didn't read Harry Potter, but I'm familiar with the fact that if you said his name, something bad would happen or he would show up. And yes, and it's kind of the same thing with George Soros.
Oh yeah, and he has a very traceable influence in many different aspects of not just the U.S., a lot of different countries. But in the case of the U.S., he's known as for dumping a lot of money into Media Matters, which of course dumps money into a lot of other outfits, People for the American Way, Sleeping Giants, and if you go further down that pipeline, eventually you'll find your way to even small outfits such as Right Wing Watch and so forth.
Yeah, yeah, he's. I mean, you can follow the money in a lot of the cases, specifically with the DA. But even Newt Gingrich, I think the last thing he said, he's like, "Okay, I get it. Okay, so this is verboten. We're just never gonna touch on this," and that's kind of the way it is. And this was on Fox News too. This is where the buck stops as far as mainstream conservative news goes. I mean, I know that Fox News isn't. They're mostly rhinos and whatnot, but
I've heard
still,
it,
that's
at least with relation to Trump, I've heard it well described as it's not pro Trump, it's just the least anti Trump.
yeah. A lot of their hosts are overtly anti-Trump. Chris Wallace, we talked about him
Uh,
on one of the
yeah.
previous episodes. I think Brett Bayer got upset at him once. Shepard, he quit because of how much he hated Trump.
Remember Megyn Kelly?
He's also gay. Megyn Kelly. I remember Megyn Kelly. And then she got hers in the end because she defended blackface and they fired her.
Well, they all eat
on her new
themselves.
network.
Well, I think that was a pretext. She was pulling in terrible ratings, and they were just looking for a reason to.
It was a nice pretext for them to have, though.
Oh, for sure. But I would say inevitably they eat their own, and I see this with a lot of people.
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling is another great example. Well, although she's not with Fox, of course, but just of the left eating their own.
Yeah, she violated orthodoxy, and now everybody hates her. I know one of my friend's girlfriends is a huge Harry Potter fan, and she's also a huge trans right activist, so she can't reconcile, wait, I love Harry Potter, but J.K. Rowling hates trans, like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. She can't put those two together. It's breaking her programming, and so I don't know, it's funny to hear these sorts of things going on. But yeah, so I mean, Newt Gingrich, he's arrived. And moving on to some other news, Final Fantasy 16, the newest trailer, was released. I guess it's the first official trailer. It was released on their social media, and this isn't really a big news topic, but I thought it was worth noting since we're talking about Newt Gingrich being based. Final Fantasy 16 also based. It's a story that seems to be set completely in a medieval Europe setting, just all white people. It's completely white. In the trailer, I didn't see anybody who was of any other race or ethnicity. Just a bunch of white people with English accents, swinging swords around, and I think this is your Final Fantasy. This is the one that was made for you.
I think that sounds like a wonderful game, a very beautiful game, and I think there's nothing wrong with having a cast that's only, that is only constituted of white people. And nobody would raise an eyebrow if this was a game set in East Asia, of which there are many such games. Nobody looks at, was that recent samurai game that was made by Western developers?
Oh, Ghost of Tsushima.
Ghost of Tsushima. I don't think there's a single non-Japanese character in that game, and nobody raised an eyebrow, because it's it's in the context of Japan in an older era, so of course, almost, if not everyone will be Japanese. I think that's a beautiful thing, and similar to this, if it's set in medieval Europe, it's a very beautiful thing. Reminds me, however, and you'll probably see this, where there was a great deal of criticism towards one of the Total War European ones, that is, for medieval warfare, and they wanted more black representation in it. They said historical accuracy is just a pretext, or this is they were trying to argue it as a white supremacist dog whistle or something.
Right. And I'm sure as we near the release of Final Fantasy 16, whenever it's due to come out, it's going to get canceled again. Like all of these other pieces of media, it's too white. There's not enough representation. The Witcher, that franchise, it was written by, I think, a Polish guy. And, well, it takes place in Europe, and I think a lot of it, well, specifically the TV show, it's Netflix, so they injected a bunch of weird racial diversity, but it takes place in the far north. I think there's a lot of snow and cold where there's 7 black people, and they injected a bunch of this racial diversity into it. And I had a couple friends who were like, this is kind of jarring. It doesn't seem right, because it's just not a place that has a lot of black people historically.
That's true. It wouldn't be the first time either.
Yeah, and that, we keep going on about this, but that reminds me of some years ago, Resident Evil 5. Capcom cocked on this one. They went to sub-Saharan Africa somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but most of the people are black, and so most of the zombies, you would expect them to be black, but there was outcry you're only killing black people. What the hell? So Capcom went in and added some white or lighter skin enemy models to balance that out. Nobody cared, by the way, in Resident Evil 4 when you were just killing a bunch of Spaniards, because the game takes place in Spain. Nobody said anything about that.
A lot of
It's
these
just the
people,
black
as I've
people.
mentioned before, these people are, it's always projection. And so they're
Yeah,
attributing racist motives onto other people, when really these, shall I say, accusations are based or predicated on their own racist beliefs. And so they just believe others are naturally doing it, or their own racist beliefs, rather, would influence their perception of these games. They see a white protagonist striking down zombie Africans and inescapably see a racial dynamic to it.
yeah. Especially like Chris Redfield. He's a white guy. You run it up blasting black dudes. But who was the side character in that game?
How's that black
It
girl? I
was
can't remember her
it,
name.
it was Shiva. She's an Indian.
Oh, Indian.
Shiva. Yeah. You play that game co-op if you go and play it because the AI is
I
retarded.
guess she's kind of like
Anyway.
Kamala.
Yeah, the AI, Kamala's AI is really low tech. It's a Reagan era AI. One last thing to talk about before I hand things off to you is the tennis player. I think it was the U.S. Open that recently concluded, and Naomi Osaka was the winner of the women's division, and she's been in the news a lot recently. She's half black and half Haitian. Or
Half
sorry, she's
black,
half
half
Japanese and half.
Asian.
Shut up, shut up. We're talking about black people. My mind it's fixed on Anyway, I got jungle fever for a second. All right, so she's half Japanese and half Haitian, and she's been in the news because she'll wear the masks that have the names of all these criminals who were killed by cops unjustly, as she believes, like Ahmaud Arbery and
Well, who was not even killed by
what.
cops, by the way.
Yeah, what I mean, maybe that wasn't what. It's just
She
you know
probably
the
wore
people,
that mask because
Floyd
he's one of the names on
and
there.
all those people. Yeah, so she got a list and she got all these masks. I wonder where she bought those masks. By the way, I don't see them on sale out there. So she probably maybe Soros sent her
I'll
a
bet
little
they were sent
package
to
with all
her.
those masks.
Somebody.
As, anyway, it was funny because the American leftist media they lost their minds over it because since she's half Japanese, Japanese companies sponsor her, and the Japanese public is largely interested in her performance. But when asked about it, they will not, under any circumstances, remark on the social justice aspect of her career. They'll congratulate, oh, she did a very great job on the tennis court. And then anytime the social justice stuff comes up, well, that's her personal thing. We don't talk about that. And then
Well, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, I applaud these companies for taking that stance, and I'm glad that they do. But it was also funny to see how the leftist media, oh my God, Japan is the most racist, most horrible country. We need to enlighten them. We need to save them. And it was just, I thought it was worth mentioning, since this is something that we talk about a lot with the social justice aspect and the racial animus, as you said. We've touched on this more than a few times, and this is an aspect of that it's not really recognized in a lot of places around the world. This is a Western sort of thing.
Well, not only that, these are very Amerocentric issues. Japan isn't a country with many black people to begin with. It's one of the more homogenous countries in this planet. So this is
That's the problem. That's the problem for the media. Like they need diversity. They need to be
ironically.
saved.
And so one of the greater ironies is in academia, what we call social justice is aligned with what's known as critical race theory. And critical race theory within it has a notion known as white saviorism, which is, of course, the sort of othering of what they would consider non-white people, of course, but they use white in a different sense in academia. It's not strictly white people. You can have non-whites acting in white, and sort of this white, shall I say, saviorism in this case. And so this is trying to, or viewing your culture or background or language or anything of that sort is superior, and viewing it as your sort of onus to make sure that others of that in these othered cultures, that is, that they receive it, that they are given this gift and so forth, and they condemn this. They'll view this, condemn it historically, retroactively, or when they view it as white supremacist, which of course doesn't mean anything anymore. But if they see it that way, they'll condemn it. However, this is exactly what they are doing. They are coming as Westerners, and they're coming to a non-Western country. They're coming to Japan and say, "Well, you need to be more civilized. You need to be enlightened. Let us bestow upon you immoral people proper morality." And they do this with a bunch of other countries too. It would probably be akin to Japan. Why can't you be a good East Asian country? Why can't you be more like Taiwan? Why can't you be a good Asian country and be more like us or something like that? It's horribly bigoted. And again, it's just one of the countless instances of that betrays their projection.
Yeah, and it's one of their specific strategies. Of course, it's hypocritical. It betrays their projection, as you said. I think that's a great way of putting it, and it's just one of many of the strategies they employ to spread their. I think we could call it dogma at this point. And well, one of our main topics tonight was one that you wanted to talk about. It's another one of their strategies. Not everybody, of course, uses it, and it's not exclusively used on the left, but it is something that is commonly seen in these political debates, these political arguments. So that's the issue, the strategy. It's a rhetorical strategy. Why don't you explain it? You
I was
explained it
thinking
much
about
better
it, and
in the
ironically
pre.
enough,
Yeah.
it's sort of the left's version of the slippery slope that they always, again, projection for everything that they always accuse the right of having. And I noticed this when I was listening to
Right.
some discussions over the odious film Cuties, the contemptible film Cuties, that is.
Right. We didn't talk about that leading up to its release. Yeah, I
Well,
don't even think
there,
we gave it a
in these
mention at all.
conversations, there are a good many people saying that a film like this should not be made, and then the response is, "Oh, so you want to just start taking kids away from their parents?" And that they jumped immediately. If you want anything done, then naturally what you are asking for is the most extreme possible authoritarian response, which is of course not
Right.
true. My answer would be, we should be, you're not going to even be able to stop, some French filmmaker from making a film of that sort. But what you can do is fine Netflix for airing such things. Is what they did with Microsoft during the antitrust bust in the late 1990s, I think it was, where they just kept fining them progressively more until they complied.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And I mean, as far as Netflix goes, I know this is going to break away from your topic a little bit, but I'm not even sure if a fine would be necessary because they've lost so many subscribers. People are jumping ship from Netflix left and
Well,
right.
their
I think
stocks
that
came back up a few percentage. It didn't recover wholly, but they're just banking on waiting it out. And a lot of companies do this. They'll get some backlash, but oh well, they'll come back anyways. And unfortunately, usually that's the case, or the long-term losses aren't really that great. You see it with Disney
mm-hmm.
or with a lot of these big conglomerates that keep doing all these progressive policies or injecting progressive politics despite it losing money. NFL is doing it, Disney's doing it, Nike's doing it, all these companies do it. And you do see short-term losses, but in the end, it doesn't amount to too much. And I think a lot of it is because of these sorts of efforts to sort of undermine any sort of popular movement or organization with this. Well, it's an authoritarian response, or they'll come with some other false concern. How shall I phrase it? How would they phrase it? Rather, they'll say, "Well, you really think you're just going to have some big cultural shift and convince everyone in the country a certain way?" They'll try to how shall I say, demoralize you from taking action as well by trying to say, well, it's impossible.
Yes, the demoralization. That's one of the things I thought about when you mentioned this strategy. Yeah, and it can kind of, I think, along with demoralizing people, I think it tricks them because they might say, oh, well, yeah, I don't really agree with such extreme action. Oh, well, I guess I've been shut down or something like that. I think in the past, I may have even come up against that where, I wasn't familiar with talking about these sorts of issues, so I didn't have the mental capability to fight back in a debate. So I think that something like this, for the people who aren't politically initiated, this will stop the argument and it will cede that ground to the person using the strategy, because they'll kind of get you on their side in that way, like, oh geez, I'm not in favor of authoritarianism. That's right. Oof,
It's
well,
this sort of
maybe they've got a
this
point.
sort of tactical libertarianism. A lot of them are socialists or progressives, but well, in this case, well, now
Yeah.
suddenly they're libertarians. They've gotten in touch with their inner libertarian, that is. And another
Yeah.
instance of it is you'll see this a lot One case that I saw recently was after two LA, sorry, was in Compton, two police officers were nearly executed fighting for their lives in the
Yeah,
hospital.
yeah.
And a lot of people publicly were condemning the protesters outside of the hospital, chanting for these cops to die. And immediately out of the woodworks
Mm.
comes all these, communists online saying, well, it's free speech. It's free speech.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's free speech for them.
Oh, yes.
It's shut up, bigot for you.
They're the ones who
And
are constantly going on about, oh, free speech is not freedom from consequences. But now suddenly, well, no, shut up. You
that's
can't say anything bad about them. It's free speech. Don't you want free speech?
yeah, yeah. And just, I mean, that's disgusting. To have to defend things like cuties and the open call or open wish for two cops to die. To defend that at all is really really disgusting. But this strategy that the left slippery slope, it adds another layer of disgust because it is a really like tactical libertarianism, like you said. It's very underhanded, very sneaky, and I think it's worth talking about. I mean, people should know that this is something that they often employ, and they're not doing it out of their respect for free speech or respect for liberty or freedom or whatever. It's because they want to forward their agenda, and they will try and convert you in any possible way they can.
Oh, absolutely. And it extends to just countless other subjects as well. I suppose there's the infamous. They're private companies. They can do whatever they want, even though they're.
Oh, that's my favorite.
That's the classic, and they're the ones who always clamor constantly for new. What's what I'm looking for? New regulation regimes just across the board to control behaviors of companies and so forth. But whenever it's in their favor, suddenly, well, they're private companies. They can do whatever they want. You can't pass regulations about that.
Yes, yeah, definitely, yeah. The private companies, yeah.
Yeah, they want to
I think
abolish
that one's
capitalism.
the most common one. Yeah, they hate private property, private companies, private profits, private everything. But oh wait, it's Twitter. I mean, it's Facebook. Come on, guys. I mean, it's a free country. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, they suddenly they're friends of liberty. They love freedom.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. So any other
On this
anything else about this rhetorical strategy?
on this particular topic, I think I've said the summation of my thoughts on it for now.
Okay, well, I mean, we're talking about the tech companies kind of having free reign and
I
leftists
am.
supporting
So there's
that. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of news in social media, I guess, that we could talk about. A couple of topics we've yet to
Oh,
discuss.
yes, quite a lot. So I think the first could be Twitter's public policy director leaving his position to join Biden's transition team.
Hmm. How about that? It's almost like Twitter isn't politically neutral.
Oh, this is
It's almost like they have an agenda.
oh, this has been very well documented time and time again, but they lie to Congress regularly about it. They'll lie on the floor and they're never held to account for it. When there was that big infiltration of Twitter accounts, you could see a lot of the options and tools that outright show or reveal that they were lying. That's when they said algorithms sort a lot of this out, and you can see a lot of the tools that are there specifically for staff to moderate and manage a lot of profiles, and even for re-entry into Twitter. They know accounts that have, or many accounts that have re-entered Twitter despite being banned, and they sort out which ones they approve of, which ones they don't. They're known constantly for manipulating hashtags. This is also very well documented based off scrutinizing reactions to or interactions under certain hashtags. And you'll see hashtags that have been around longer and have far fewer interactions than hashtags that have been around for a short period of time but have maybe 10 times as many interactions. So the hashtags, what that is, of course, is the news that you see when you go to the home page effectively. Think of it that way. And of course, you can see as well that Kanye, he doxed, I think it was the head of Forbes, and Twitter forced him to take that tweet down because you can't dox people who matter, apparently, or who they deem are important. But
Yeah, you can't dox their
yeah,
friends.
but Jack Dorsey himself personally follows several very lefty accounts, I would imagine communist, Antifa maybe, and who proudly brag about doxing. And when this is brought up as a rule violation, they they show off screenshots showing, look, Jack Dorsey himself follows me. I think he's okay with this, condescendingly.
Yeah, yeah, and well, I don't really know what else to say. I think you've pretty much encapsulated it. I mean, Jack, he's playing for one side, and if you're not on that side, I mean, it's your fair game. They're gonna rip you up. And actually, speaking of Twitter, I think our Twitter might finally be working.
That's good.
I haven't been able to get it to work. They as soon as I created an account, they suspended me.
Oh, suspended?
Yeah, they suspended me because they thought I was a robot or something, and they wouldn't let me do anything to fix that. And recently, I got it to. I think I got it to work on my phone, so we'll see. Maybe that'll be another avenue to communicate with people until we get banned in like a month. And speaking of getting banned, I think Spotify banned us already.
Well,
I
Spotify
think their
also
algorithm
did apparently with Joe Rogan. I don't want to use the crass word for that, but let's just say Joe Rogan's been, shall I say, how would you phrase it? What happened to Joe Rogan?
cocked.
Okay, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, he cocked. There you go. It's fine. You can say
So
it.
what happened?
We're already banned on Spotify. Who cares?
I just don't like to use coarse language too often. But
Oh, okay. Well, I'll use it for you.
in Rogan's case, so what happened is he runs the biggest podcast on the internet, and he's had on a very large array of guests, and these include some very controversial conservative figures, the likes of which include, shall we say, Alex
Alex
Jones,
Jones,
Milo Yiannopoulos, Gavin
McInnes.
McInnes, and a good few others as well. However,
Yeah.
Spotify refuses to allow him to upload these onto their platform. And they've confirmed
Yeah.
that they will not allow them on their platform, and they have even had meetings apparently discussing what other episodes of his they want to remove from the platform.
This is ridiculous.
Oh, and Spotify.
Because I mean, well, oh, go ahead.
Spotify used to be pretty good about this, but really, and for a lot of these platforms, you can see where things changed. And with Spotify, it seems they announced, I think it was a month ago, that they were going to host their big show that was going to put them on the map, so to speak, and that was Michelle Obama's podcast. And right after they announced that, they
Oh,
really
great.
started cleaning house.
Yeah. These companies. The Michelle Obama thing reminds me of Netflix. They had her documentary uploaded on there, and I noticed right around the same time. I used to subscribe to Netflix, but I don't anymore. But I noticed at the same time that they had the the takedown Roger Stone documentary. That's Trump's guy's name, right? Stone?
Yeah, Roger Stone.
Roger Stone. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with him. Whenever the news says something about him, I just ignore it. But I noticed that they had their takedown Roger Stone documentary going up, and it's Spotify, Netflix. It's just all propaganda outlets now. I don't even think they care about turning profits anymore. I think the government just says, listen, or one part of the government says, listen, you're working for us now. You're the
A lot of these companies
propaganda arm
got
of our
their
division
starts
now.
through government subsidization initially.
Yeah. No, they have to pay the piper, I guess. And so it's just, we're going to tell you what to put up and what to take down, and you just listen to us. Don't worry about your profits. It's fine.
Oh, that reminds me, Tucker Carlson had a great segment, and I can't remember the gentleman's or the odious figure's name, but he was involved with the intelligence community and and was involved in the Obama administration as well, and he is accused as having sort of trying to implement a sort of color revolution against Donald Trump. And one of his big avenues of attack has been the legal system. He himself alone has launched several hundred, I think it was over 100 in any case, lawsuits against the president, all with the intention of slowing down everything. And he also apparently, in these sorts of revolutions, outlines that you need the election results to be as contested as possible, and that seems to coincide with the media and all these other institutional pushes for ballot or mail-in voting, even though, as has been pointed out, all of their health gurus for the coronavirus, that is Dr. Fauci and so forth, have said it's safe to vote in person.
Yes. Were they not briefed on the whole, tell them all that you can't vote in person, or did they just break rank or something? Did they forget? Are they having a Joe Biden
Well, if
moment?
the
I would have thought, I was sure, I was positive that Fauci was going to say, no, you cannot vote in person. We can't do that. You have to do mail-in voting. I was positive he was going to say that.
I suppose it was a possibility, but I can't say to know exactly what's going on or what he's thinking in particular. I can only offer some sorts of speculation, and if it is indeed meant to contest the election results as much as possible, that could be with the intention of creating a very stark divide of, look, we can just vote in person, it's fine, versus a very rabid sort of a portion of the country that is insistent on voting by mail, and for obviously unstated reasons. That being, they want higher turnouts, and this is all about this notion of voter suppression, of course.
On that topic, and since we're talking about the media, I look at the headlines. I don't really dive deep into specific articles, but judging from a lot of the headlines, they're framing a case where it is when the results are contested. Not if, it's when. It's going to happen, and this is what's going to happen when that happens. I've been noticing that in the past week, I've seen a couple of these articles where they're laying out all of the quote unquote facts. Like, this is how it's going to play out. Basically, they're saying this is how Joe Biden's going to win. We're going to contest the results. We're going to do a little bit of black magic.
Here's how Joe Biden can still win, you mean?
No.
That was a joke about Bernie.
Okay.
Because on Reddit, they're always,
override
no matter what
right.
happens, here's how Bernie can still
Right.
win, guys, match me.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was...
Yeah. No, that's a good one. I just way over my head. But this is the case for when Biden inevitably loses, and they mess around and then they turn the L into a W. Kind of like, you take your report card when you're a kid and, you got an F in chemistry or something, and you try and use a Sharpie or something to change the F into an A.
Yeah, something of that sort, definitely. We've seen cases of this in an Austrian election, I recall, where you had, in some town, there was 105% voter turnout, some strange abnormalities when it came to the mail-in voting that was going on over there. It came from abroad, outside of Austria. That was a few years back. However, in this particular case, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, right. What I think the white pill about this is, and by white pill I mean something that instills hope, is it really does reveal how little the confidence they have in Biden is. They really don't think he can win. His own side, his most ardent supporters, do not have faith in his capacity to win this election. And you...
Well,
Sorry?
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done.
I was just going to say, and you look at even any public appearance, just how much he gasps, even with a teleprompter. He's waving his hand, the teleprompter messes up, and he's just rambling on for about 20 seconds incoherently.
Yeah, and Kamala Harris, in her most recent public appearance, I think she even slipped and said Harris administration. Like, if a Harris administration is in the White House, like she's been briefed. If we win somehow, you're the president. Joe Biden's just gonna, bumble around and talk about corn pop, and it's just such a broken. They're all broken and
Absolutely.
destroyed
Harris's
at this point.
big publicity campaign is the shoes she's wearing. That's what it's come down to.
Oh yeah. I saw that one.
She's wearing Timberlands.
Even...
She's just like us, guys.
Oh my god!
I'll bet she has hot sauce in her purse too.
That she plays Pokemon Go
to the polls. Yeah, I'll bet she's hip with the kid.
Oh my god, she's so cool. I wonder if she owns a Nintendo Switch and plays on that there Animal Crossing.
Yeah, she just lies about rap albums she listened to, despite them not having come out at the time she purports to have listened to them.
It's just, and the contempt that side has for people. It's, you could see it all up and down their leadership. They really don't like the average American.
Oh yes, they're elitist, they're out of touch, absolutely. And you also, I would also say, what's worth paying attention to is the enthusiasm. You see what's the support hashtag for Biden? Is it Biden 2020? No, it's settle for Biden.
Well, to be fair, Biden's settling.
Not very long.
He's settling into senility.
Indeed. And you look at a lot of these events for Trump, you had this massive boat rally. You had a large audience at his White House acceptance speech for the Republican nomination. You saw recently this big car parade. It was over 3,000 cars. And to compare, in Biden's own hometown, there was also a car parade, and it was about 3 cars.
Yeah, actually, talking about Trump, there's one thing I want to mention about Trump. He was in a recent town hall event held by ABC, and he called out George Stephanopoulos. He's like, George, I know you're a Democrat, but come on, man, come on. He called him out on TV, so it's a little moment, but the facade that these networks are run by, unbiased people. It's really broken down. Trump just outright just aired it out. He was given all of these loaded questions. Why what about the racism in black community? I mean, against black communities, and it's like, well, it's all Democrats cities.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done my part. Just look at, like, he's calling it out. He's calling.
He's very good to
the way
point it
we
out.
all
Yeah.
see it.
He's put it on
Yeah,
Twitter. He
and
points it out in these interviews, at his rallies, public appearances. That look,
I've just
yes, sir.
I've just never seen anything like, I don't know. I don't remember him doing this during the 2016 campaign. It was more. I guess he hadn't won yet, so maybe he was just playing it more, by the book, down the middle. But he's really, I guess, as the fervor against him has gone up, he's responded in kind.
Oh no, he's had many instances like this, at least during his presidency, where he's been quite, or he addresses journalists in the proper manner, and that is in a manner quite like this, where in some cases a journalist will ask him I can't remember what the question was, but Trump's reply to that was simply, "What a stupid question to ask. That is such a stupid question."
Well,
And he just moved on to the next person.
in this one, he clearly laid out the partisan lines. You are clearly, on that side. In the White House press conference things, the fake news things, he didn't specifically say, "Okay, you're just a bunch of Democratic shills."
Alluded to it. In one case, remember, they're asking him about his staff not social distancing or what have you, and he just replied to the journalist, "Oh, it's fine. They're just peaceful protesters."
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, even that, it's more implied. It's more implied than overt, is what is my main point. So I mean, I liked to see him say,
Oh,
you
actually,
Democrats, you just hate me.
one example that throughout 2016 he kept calling CNN the Clinton News Network.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good one. I mean, it is. Um,
Uh,
anyway, all right, yeah. So
so
yeah, we were talking about. I guess we kind of lost track of what
we
we were
went on a
talking
bit of a
about there.
tangent, but it was a good tangent.
Yeah.
One of the topics. So I guess we can move on from social media, and the topic I remember you really quite wanted to talk about was the sort of what you described, the blackwashing of culture.
Well, yeah, this was originally, you brought it up originally, but it is something that I've noticed more and more in, especially the last 2 years. I would say, especially the last 2 years. It's always been there to an extent, but in the last 2 years, especially with the rise of the racial strife and everything going on, there's been a lot of blackwashing of the culture. And first off, I want to touch on 2 shows. One of them's already canceled. I don't think it was supposed to be a limited series, but the Watchmen show on HBO. I'm not a huge comic book fan. I don't care about the comic book all that much, but I did enjoy the film, and I didn't get to see the Watchmen show. I didn't really want to see it, but it was overtly racial propaganda. I think the very first scene in the very first episode opens up in the Tulsa race riots in 1920 whatever, and they literally had planes bombing black people. I think there was a biplane that dropped a bomb on a movie theater or something.
This is what they call Black Wall Street. I know the story.
Yeah, and it was really, really crazy, and it sets, like, Watchmen has its own themes and the topics it tackles. It's I think it's more of a philosophical sort of thing. It doesn't really touch on race. It's not about that, and they took it and they overtly twisted it into something that was about race. That's not to say it's all bad. They do have these weird little parts of the show that are actually quite good. There's a little bit of foreshadowing. Like they do envision a government that's been completely taken over by lefties. So the cops' guns are actually locked. Like they can't pull them out. They have these holsters in the car, and you can't actually pull them out unless you're given clearance. So a cop is actually killed in the first episode as a result of that he couldn't access his firearm.
Sounds like the UK.
And they have, well, they don't even have guns, do they?
Some of them do, but special units.
No. Anyway, so the Watchmen show has little moments like that, but the mainline story is white people suck and black people are here to take back what's theirs. They're here to, this is our revolution. We're here to fight back and, you know, show you that we're going to rise up. Black people rise up. And
are you?
Another one, yeah. Anyway, it's the second show is more recent. Watchmen got canceled after one season, but Lovecraft Country. This one, yeah, I have a particular appreciation for literature as a whole. I'm not a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan, but I do appreciate and respect what he did for horror and sci-fi and these sorts of things. And Lovecraft Country is just blatant. You know, it's cultural appropriation. It's the thing that they always accuse everybody else of. They've even come out and said that they're taking back. They're recontextualizing that horrible racist literature.
They try to do that with Pepe.
And well, I don't know how it's going to work with Lovecraft, but it didn't seem to work with Pepe. But anyway, with Lovecraft Country, the show is about Jim Crow era America and this black family inheriting this really awesome mansion and fortune, and then there's the H.P. Lovecraftian monsters, and they show up from the dark and from the depths. But the real monster of the show is racism. Man. It's the Whites. They're the real monster, and that's the whole show. Like I didn't really watch a lot of this show, but it's presented as the white man's trying to put this boot on your neck, and you gotta rise up.
Sounds to me something
rise up.
Nick Cannon would write.
I don't know if he's even clever enough to write that.
Well, he would be a creative director, I suppose. Then.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you know, but I mean, for you, I know you don't really follow these shows or these movies. I know you have a particular distaste for anything that comes out of Hollywood. Well, have you noticed this taking place at all? Have you been seeing more of it?
Oh, absolutely. Even me,
for
for someone who doesn't have Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime, doesn't watch Hollywood movies all that often. Once in a blue moon, I watched
Star Wars.
Oh yes, I saw the new Star Wars, Hacksaw Ridge. Not many films. That's about all I can remember watching in recent memory.
Mm-hmm. You'll watch a Mel Gibson affair.
Oh yes, I'll watch a Mel Gibson film. I quite like him. He's based, I suppose. He's an eccentric, but I have an appreciation for him.
I'm surprised he's still alive.
Yeah, he's certainly quite a man in many regards, many respects.
Yeah, I thought he would have been suicided years ago.
Oh, that's a story.
He said some pretty inflammatory things about Hollywood.
That's a different topic.
Two things specifically.
I don't think he'd get suicided over that, but it's a topic for a different time. I do see ads and news stories in passing on occasion. And one of the ones that caught my attention was the Golden Girls. For some reason, they're bringing that back, but now it's all black for some reason.
Well, we were all clamoring for a Golden Girls reboot.
And when I think Golden Girls, I just imagine black people thinking, can we just have Golden Girls but black?
Yeah.
What strikes my attention though is this increasing tendency in a lot of media to take shows or properties that feature a white person and just replace them with a black person for no apparent reason other than just to have a black person there. And so again, they are constantly hammering on about this notion of whitewashing, and this would be nakedly a sort of blackwashing. Well, here's these established white characters, or shall we say white or famous white characters or properties that feature white people, and we're just going to again paint over them with a black brush. They were trying to do this with Marvel for a bit, but they got too much pushback, so they got a bit creative with how to do it. I know.
Oh man, they're dead. Marvel's the comic book is their comic book division seems to be dead. Like they're on life support.
Yeah, nobody really cares about it, and I don't know
Yeah.
much about it, but I do remember some people mentioning that Captain America was turned into a Nazi. I think, yeah, was turned into a
Yeah.
Nazi,
Yeah.
then he became black, and then he was white again. It's just a mess.
Yeah. So one thing about this topic is it's interesting because I use the term cultural appropriation. I really think it is.
It
That's what it is.
absolutely
It's
is,
it's
yeah.
retaking the culture because whitewashing is such a bad thing, and Hollywood will go to whatever lengths to not be accused of whitewashing. So what happens when you remake the Golden Girls with black people, or you remake the Karate Kid with a black kid? You can never change them back to white because if you do, oh wait, the lasso is black. What are you whitewashing it now? So I think a
That's an
lot of these
interesting way to
franchises, like
put it. I never thought of that.
you can never go back to having
Um,
a white
I think
protagonist.
that might be possible, but if I were to level some criticism or to counterpoint, just for the sake of having an opposing voice, so they did do this with a lot of females. They painted over male characters and females, and in the case of some of these properties, they went right back to having male characters.
Yeah, well, I think that the criticism has always been mostly been about race, though. It's always specifically been whitewashing. Ghost in the Shell did it with Scarlett Johansson. Oh, you're whitewashing the Japanese
That's
character. It's
fair.
I think it's usually with race. I think that with gender, it's that's an
That
element, but
that's true.
you can mitigate that a little bit by coming back with a black man. Because okay, well, there's
Ah,
a different angle for representation. It's
now
not
you're
as
thinking
bad
like a
anymore.
progressive. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, hey, you gotta think
You have
like
to
them
understand
to
your adversaries. Absolutely.
become a good Democrat voting consumer. And furthermore, there's a couple more points I had about the culture thing, and there's this like black campaign. There's these rising up movies, the RRU, and there's a new one coming out as of this recording. It's coming out tomorrow, I believe, or it might already be out, but it's very recent. Antebellum.
Oh,
Antebellum. I mentioned this movie a little bit, and it takes place. Well, it's supposed to be this weird horror movie, but I've already read early reviews from critics who generally skew left and who favor social justice, messages, and even they don't seem to like it very much because it's a horror movie that just doesn't have any horror. It's about this rich black woman who gets time traveled back into slave times, and they make this strange connection with the modern world where like the slave era America kind of glitches out, and you can kind of see like modern America or the modern things. I think she
uh,
sees a plane flying, but then it flickers out, so it's like, oh, actually, slavery never ended.
oh
Oh,
yeah, it's just a different name. Which that there is a topic a discussion to be had about that, but not in the way they quite think.
and well, in regards to this is the next in the line of specifically one person. Jordan Peele has been at the forefront of racial horror. That's a new genre now. It's racial horror. And he didn't write or direct this one, but he produced this one. And the ones he's famous for are Get Out and Us. And it's Get Out is just basically white people fetishize black people. And so the white people have to control them and like harvest
Their
their
melanin.
culture from that because white people are so lame and they suck so much
This is that sort
it's
of
just
Kang posting nonsense to go on a slight
yeah
tangent where
it's yeah
they'll say, well, all the modern music genres in America were, created by black people. And they're not wrong about that, but what they also neglect to mention is the instruments that made that possible were invented by white people. The guitar and so forth.
actually I would say that in some cases they're well, I mean, in regards to black music,
Oh, there's
I mean,
jazz,
sorry,
big band.
no, I meant rap music, black rap music. um the producers were all Jews. Like they were all. I mean, no. It's document like NWA and all these people. They have uh, Jewish guys behind the boards doing all the sound equipment and stuff.
Well, that's in the
This isn't
modern
like
industry, I
rich
suppose. But I
Jewish
think in its
people
original
and you think this
inception,
is
they'll trace it back to, I think, churches during the slave era. I think is the origin,
I
what they'll argue the origins is. I don't know if that's exactly true, so don't quote me on that. But I think that's where they base the origins off of. Of course, this is also related to European or originated poetry schemes. I recall.
That's there's a lot of truth. I know a little bit about a little bit, not a lot. I'm not an
It's not
expert
a
about
topic
like
I'm the most
early rock and
interested
roll
in.
and stuff, and a lot of the like Elvis and Buddy Holly and the Beatles, they took a lot of cues from
Oh
black
yeah,
music.
Elvis
But
is
one,
known for having a particularly strong liking for black people in America, which is the irony of them attacking. There was a property of his that was vandalized recently during one of these riots, and that's
oh,
kind of the sad irony of it is that Elvis really had an affinity for black people in the country.
he was also a pedophile.
Was he?
But that's neither. Yeah, he was.
Oof.
He dated a 14-year-old when he
Oh
was like
no.
20 or
What,
whatever,
21
and
or
he had
41?
a 21, I think,
Okay, well that's weird,
and
but I'm not gonna get into that.
well, anyway, um, with black music and its influence in 50s America, I mean, it is true that there was a huge influence, but one of the things that the record companies had to point out, and specifically to somebody like Little Richard, who actually had to change his lyrics, their music is also extremely vulgar and not fit for modern
It really
audiences.
is. All these, I see a lot of these suburbanite white people, quote the first few lines or some of the main lines of "Where the Hood At," but they have never listened to the full uncensored version of that song, which is just the whole thing is sort of an anti-gay screed. It's hilariously anti-gay.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. So this goes all the way back to the 50s when Little Richard, he had the song "Tutti Frutti," and the original lyrics was it had like "goddamn." It said "goddamn"
Oof.
in it, and in 1950s America, you didn't say
Yeah, I don't think you
"goddamn." So
should.
they actually had to change the lyrics for that, and that was the case with a lot of 20s, 30s, 40s black musicians. Is well, why didn't they get to profit on their music? One of the reasons, not the whole reason, but one of the reasons is they were really vulgar and they didn't want to change the lyrics. So anyway, yeah, that's a bit of a tangent there, but um, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
I did want to mention one last thing, and it's something that everybody can kind of pay attention and look out for. I don't know, look out is the right word, but observe. On YouTube, I've noticed that you get these ads. I've noticed that now you get two ads instead of one, which is
I use
kind of
ad block, so I
annoying.
don't
But
know.
all right, well, anyway, I don't care enough to use ad block. I didn't really think about it, but I have noticed that the ads on YouTube, they've been blackwashed as well. It's 90% of the ads that I personally get are commercials for regular companies, but the always black people. There's very very few white people, and especially very few white men. Sometimes you get a white lady, but it's mostly the Old Spice commercial. It's a black couple. The Doritos commercial was half, I think, mixed race or light skinned black woman. Yeah, those are the two that come to mind immediately. But most of the commercials I see,
Doesn't surprise
it's
me.
just black people.
Although if we're on the commercial subject, reminds me of that really controversial. I believe it was a Chinese commercial where the Chinese woman tricks. It was very controversial. Kind of shoves or lures a black man into a wash machine, and he comes out as this pale Chinese skinned man. And this received international criticism for being horribly
It's
racist.
one of the best commercials ever, though.
It is humorous, but there's an Italian commercial which is the opposite thing, in fact, where there is an Italian man. He's kind of scrawny, old, gross, and the Italian woman is, unimpressed by him, so to speak, and she lures him into the wash machine. He comes out this big, black, muscular man. It's playing rap music, and not a single person ever raised any criticism. It's
Yeah.
amazing that I didn't even know about this until quite recently. And again, to this day, you don't really know. Most people don't know about this, but they do know about the Chinese commercial. At least a fair amount of people do.
What about that Thai commercial you told me about? That one's
That one's
that
just
one's pretty good
weird,
too.
but it's quite funny. You would never be able to, even though that's kind of meant to paint a sympathetic image. Don't judge black people just based off how weird it is. I don't think it would fly in Western.
No, it wouldn't.
Western
It
people are
wouldn't
too
fly.
sensitive, and by West I mean the Anglosphere, West Europe. They're too sensitive these days.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. So, well, I think that's. I mean, of course, there's a lot to say about the blackwashing of culture, but do you have any closing thoughts regarding that
I
topic?
guess it's only getting more pervasive. I think one of the most famous examples is Hamilton. Imagine painting a famous black historical character or portraying him or having him played by anybody who isn't black. Have Nelson Mandela played by a white person, I guess, and
Oh
see how that
man, I
goes.
kind of want to make that movie.
Yeah.
That would be a great movie. That would be lots of laughs just for all of the outrage. But I mean, I guess considering that Jesus was actually black,
Oh,
that I
jeez,
mean,
that's a topic
we've
in
whitewashed
itself.
that.
It's a very evil people who are trying to disseminate or pervade, force that, I should say, artificially pervade that. And there was that
Well, I think
black
that
congressional candidate in New York who was going on about how Jesus was the first original black revolutionary. But and throughout his whole screed about it, what it is, and so it's a big tangent. What it is with these people is they will not worship Christ unless he is of the same race of them, which is again an anathema to the whole purpose of Christianity, and it shows or betrays that they are not really in their hearts Christian. They are using it as a political device to reach their own ends, and again that it is uh, a openly homosexual man pushing very evil causes and is again stating his desire to worship Christ solely because he's black. It should be painfully obvious, but too many people are afraid to point this out anymore. And I'm afraid, and it's not that I hate this man.
yeah.
I'm being descriptive. I'm describing what is happening before me. That's all.
Well, when you're talking about being afraid, there's a lot at stake to call something like that out.
Oh, and that's the thing. You'll point it. It's easy to point on the other side too. You'll have a lot of people who would self-avow as sort of white nationalists, or even further than that, and they refuse, or they have a disdain for Christianity because they believe Jesus was Jewish, and it's just the opposite side of the coin. It's, well, I'm not going to worship Jesus because he wasn't a white man. He wasn't a European. He was
How's
a white.
Odin?
Yeah, that's exactly. They'll worship Odin because he was a
Yeah.
Nord.
You,
Exactly, the pagan person.
you like
No,
Odin. You
he's
talk about Odin
cringe,
a
but
lot.
it's just the opposite side of the coin. They won't. One side won't worship Christ unless he's black, and another side won't worship him unless he's a Nord or some sort of approved white demographic, I suppose.
Hey, so we're talking about Odin. I gotta slip this one in. So, the new God of War game, Ragnarok.
There's a new
I
one.
think Odin might be. Well, it's coming out on the PlayStation 5 at some point. It was announced recently. So Odin's gonna be in that game. I bet.
Cringe.
Odin and Thor. So you're gonna. Wait a minute. So this is one thing that I gotta push back on. Like it's Odin and Thor and Norse mythology. I mean, those are fine, backdrops for an interesting story. I mean, come on. I mean, you gotta at least concede that much. I know you hate Odin with all of your
I
heart.
don't hate anybody. It's just a little cringe because of there's different pagans. They're all cringe, but there's different pagan. Well, there's Styx would probably be the only exception. I think he identifies as a pagan, but he would be the only exception. But you have left wing pagans.
Wait, who's that?
Styx is a prominent YouTube libertarian speaker. He lives in Holland.
Oh,
He's the only exception. He's all right, but other than him, you have left wing pagans that I think he is. He's if I'm not, I'll be happy to be wrong, but I think he is. But you have left wing pagans that are just sort of anti Christian reactionaries and are just trying to LARP as pagans because of their own disdain for Christianity.
well, they're witches. They have powers.
Yeah, they're LARPers, I know. They'll throw little wood block cubes at you and scream lightning bolts.
Well, I mean, well, they'll cast a hex on you. Don't you know about hexes?
Yeah, you mean play pretend? Just say some magic word. Yeah. Well, that's what it is. Just very bizarre people.
Oh, okay, so you don't believe in the witchcraft.
No, I think they're delusional at best, and at worst, I don't
At
even
best.
want to say.
Delusional at best. That's great, man. That's great. All right, so we've established we haven't covered this before. Don't like Odin. You don't like the
Well,
witches.
on the witch thing, this
You
reminds me of
know,
Aleister Crowley. You know, he for all of his talk about how big he was into, Satan worship or what have you, what was the end of his life? He was wasn't he a hobo who died with nothing but a can of beans?
I have no idea. I don't know about him all that well.
I,
I
I,
know the
I believe
name.
that's how he died, with no one around him and a can of beans. That's it. Which, is a testament to his power, of his magical prowess, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, he was. He was something. He was something. Well, all right. Well, I mean, it's good to know that you're anti-pagan and you believe Jesus was black. That's good to know.
You got the
Um,
first part. Well, I'm not anti-pagan. I just say it's cringe. That doesn't mean
I,
I'm
I
anti-pagan.
know.
Although the race of
I
Christ is
know.
ultimately unimportant, and I don't understand the fixations about it. Although, if you were to examine the evidence, all of it would suggest that he was of a fair complexion. And you can look towards one of the, if not the oldest surviving depiction of him, which does not come from Europe. It comes from Egypt, and it has, I think it's the 4th century around then, and it depicts him as a pale man. And even
Fair enough.
demographic research as well would suggest that he would look kind of a bit similar to a modern Iraqi, which of course they're not black.
That's
There's
true.
other
It
evidence
also might be
too.
the most controversial thing you've ever said.
Uh,
Stunning and brave.
Bafflingly, this
Stunning
is
and
something
brave.
that's been understood, and there's a lot of other evidence as well, and with varying degrees of how controversial they are. Another one is these examinations performed on the Shroud of Turin and so forth.
All right then. I guess we can wrap things up for today. Do you have any final thoughts for today's episode?
Like I said, I think Trump's going to win. I really do. I think things will only become increasingly more in his favor as time progresses. We haven't even gotten to the debates yet. But they. Oh,
I mean the debates. I don't know if
the
they're going to
topic
have
for
a
next
debate.
time is the smart fires that seem to stop at the Canadian border. That would probably be a topic for next time.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And other than that, I'll just say it hasn't been mentioned in a while, but don't forget Ken and Hinnant. We're talking about, name them or what have you.
Yes.
Remember X name. Well, don't forget Ken and Hinnant.
Don't forget Cannon hit it. All right. Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to finish things off. Don't forget. Don't forget. Keep that name in your mind. Keep him in your prayers, in your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.